Execute Order 66. The Bad Batch is here on Disney Plus, and wouldn't you know it, Grand Moff Tarkin is already making some moves to wipe the clones off the galactic map. So with the advent of conscripted stormtroopers right around the corner, we ask the question, who is the better trooper, the clones or the stormtroopers? There's tons of evidence, it's pretty conclusive, and look, it's not even close. Plus, we got surprise cameos, connections to the canon all over the place, and what looks like the start of the story of what happens to the clones after Order 66. But before we get into all of that, I have to warn you, this modified Omicron-class attack shuttle is headed deep into spoiler territory for this one, so if you haven't started Bad Batch yet, or just don't want to know, now would be the time to hit the escape pods until we're done here. Those shuttles even have escape pods? Whatever, before we go any further, let's just answer the question. Based on the overwhelming amount of evidence on the subject, anyone with half a functioning cognitive unit is going to immediately and correctly deduce that the clone troopers were vastly superior to Imperial stormtroopers on the field of totally fictional and not real space battle. It's not really even an argument. Even D. Bradley Baker, the voice of all the clones in Star Wars animation, acknowledges that the clones and the stormtroopers are not equals.
Oh, I'm gonna go with clones. Clones are the most effective. You gotta go with the clone. If I'm on a rope hanging off of a mountain, I want a clone on the other end of that rope pulling me up.
Imagine for a second that Palpatine sent regular old garden variety stormtroopers and not clones to carry out Order 66. That end result would have been very different. If it's so plainly obvious that clones were the superior fighting force, why didn't the Empire just keep them around and not bother with the inferior conscripted troopers? There is now a clear answer. We'll get to that in a second, but first, a quick recap. The Bad Batch is a special strike force made up of all imperfect or experimental clones, and when Order 66 goes down, they don't respond the way the regs or standard clone troopers do. At least most of them don't.
Good soldiers follow orders.
That's Crosshair, and it turns out he's affected by the Order 66 programming, and he winds up working for the Empire, hunting the Bad Batch. Grand Moff Tarkin sends the Batch to eliminate Saw Gerrera's fledgling rebel cell, and when they don't, they become fugitives of the Empire. This is Omega, a female clone who becomes a member of the Bad Batch after the guys purposely get captured on Kamino to help her escape. Omega is the Batch's Grogu, basically, and we don't know for sure, but I'm gonna guess right now that she is Force sensitive. With Crosshair hunting him, the Batch connect with a clone deserter Cut and help him and his wife Sue and their kids escape off-world as the Empire tightens its grip on everything and everyone.
No planetary travel without a chain code.
As the galaxy shifts from Republic rule to the Empire, the clones are there to keep the citizens in line, much the way we see Imperial stormtroopers used in the original trilogy. With Tarkin on Kamino looking for ways to cut costs, it's very likely we'll soon finally have an answer to what happened to the clones after Order 66 and why we don't see them in the original trilogy outside of a few exceptions.
Perhaps Leader Snoke should consider using a clone army.
My men are exceptionally trained, programmed from birth.
We can ignore General Hux's whining for a second because Kylo does make a good point. Had the Empire kept the clones as its army instead of its clearly inferior conscripted force, the original trilogy might have just been one much shorter and way more upsetting movie. So if that's the case, why did the Empire get rid of the clones? Because they were expensive. When Tarkin visits Kamino in Episode 1 of The Bad Batch, it seems the Empire is trying to tighten its belt and cut some of the massive costs associated with creating, training, and maintaining the Grand Army of the Republic. And while this seems like a boring and banal explanation of why the Empire ditched the clones, it actually does make a lot of sense. The Emperor, as we know, is about to build 3 different Death Stars and a secret fleet of planet-destroying Star Destroyers over the next 40-odd years, and hey, that kind of firepower doesn't come cheap. This is another example of how the Empire's focus on large-scale domination means cutting costs in other areas, like, torpedo-proofing the Death Star's thermal exhaust ports, or just having an Imperial safety officer make a quick lap around the throne room and maybe put up some guardrails. And it wouldn't be an episode of Canon Fodder without the Easter eggs we found. Here's what we got. Mostly cameos. That Jedi Padawan is of course Caleb Doom, aka Kanan Jarrus from Star Wars Rebels. Caleb was seen briefly in a holo in Star Wars Season 7, and the Bad Batch opens on the mission he and his master Depa Billaba were sent on. Before she falls, Master Depa employs Ceresu or Lightsaber Form 3 to defend herself, just like she does in Caleb Doom's prequel comic.
You are more machine than man.
What Tech thinks is a throwaway line that actually echoes the way Obi-Wan Kenobi's ghost talks about Darth Vader. Right after he had to save face after Luke called him out for lying about Darth Vader murdering his father. Anyway, if those droids in the arena scene looked familiar, it's because they're prototypes, or at least very early versions of the Dark Troopers we later saw Luke Skywalker carving up in the Mandalorian finale. That there is Saw Gerrera.
Trained by Captain Rex and General Skywalker to fight for the Republic.
Yes, thank you, Tech. This version of Saw Gerrera is a bit more battle damage than when we saw him last in the Clone Wars, but not anywhere near as bad as he looks in Jedi Fallen Order or Rogue One. When he mentions everyone he's lost, he's talking about lots of people, but definitely his sister, Stila Gerrera, who died in the fight for Onderon as an indirect result of Saw's own actions. And if that nasty critter looks familiar, it's a Nexu, which was responsible for turning Padme's shirt into a crop top on Geonosis in Attack of the Clones. So what do you think? What's going to happen to the clone army? And come on, Omega is Force sensitive, right? We're not crazy. Let's talk it over in the comments. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode of Canon Fodder. For more Star Wars, check out what happens to the clones after Order 66, and for more everything, be sure to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch. May the Force be with you. We'll see you next time.